Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of an VNture podcast. I am your host Haros113 with co-host MR. And to celebrate the Halloween festive mood, today's episode will be all about trick or treat. We're going to be talking about some of our favorite VNs, either on the trick side of thing, where VNs that made your hearts pound in excitement or in fear,
or on the sweet side. Oh, those are the examples to heal the soul. Doubly important for those who just love happy ending. These are the sweet and wholesome moments from VN.
Two complete opposites in the world of VNs. So I'm going to start off on the trick side of things with one VN that I read called The Letter. The Letter was a Western developed visual novel. It made big waves back in 2017 for having extremely high production values. The art was very detailed. There were like dozens and dozens of unique backgrounds and high quality voice acting too. Voice acting is very rare for Western indie developed visual novels because it's so expensive. And it's even harder to come across quality English voice acting. But they did. What's even cooler is that because this story is set in Britain, there were all sorts of English accents involved in the area, which is pretty rare to come across. Usually everything is in American accents and whatnot. So this also gave it some uniqueness. But the letter... Oh, yeah, sorry. But first, let me describe. The Letter
Go for it.
is a story about a strange, creepy monster hunting down some individuals who have somehow irked its ire. And so the developers mentioned that they wanted to have one of those scary monster stories, but instead of the monster being confined to, say, a hotel or whatnot, it was one that followed them around the city throughout their daily lives. And that fear and the dangers involved really do a number on the poor characters.
Okay. I just wanted to have a question because you described the voice acting part before you described the VM.
Mm-hmm.
I remember from the same developer, Yang, I read Love Esquire. So I was also impressed by the quality of English visual novel they brought with the full voice acting. Although, unlike the Letter that you're describing, which is set in a realistic scenario, from what I understand, the Love Esquire was fantasy, so it wasn't that easy for me to appreciate the variety of accents. Do you feel like it added to the atmosphere for the Letter?
Oh, yes, it absolutely added to the atmosphere. Like I said, because it takes place in Britain, there's also all sorts of cultural landmarks, and it's a variety of settings. Usually, whenever you read visual novels, a lot of them are either set in Japan or in some vaguely, Western anime-inspired cross mix-up. And so to have something with featuring, mansions and wide plains and a quaint countryside, it's a great change of pace. And honestly, I felt that it fit the characters very well too. I know I haven't kept up with Yang's other titles, but I have heard that they've continued bringing high quality voice acting to other ones, and I mean that's been a huge plus for anyone interested in reading them. It helps make them much more unique. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely
a lot of
true.
times you have other written works, and although you read books and those aren't voiced, and you can a lot of times you can still hear their inner voices speaking out from the page.
Yeah,
that takes incredible writing to pull off by trained authors.
true.
And for a lot of visual novels, although they're good and many indies are trying their hardest, it's not easy to pull off. And so a lot of times when you don't have voice acting, a lot of the character dialogue just kind of runs together. It's hard to find those characters' voices.
Yeah.
So even though it's really expensive, voice acting helps out the dialogue so much to where you can actually hear their voices and any accents and any quirks. And, obviously there's difference between like male and female voices, softer and lower voices. You get so much variety and it helps to keep the material more entertaining.
Yeah, it helps to deliver the nuance of how people can stutter, and you can hear that.
You can hear the terror in their voices.
Exactly.
Ooh. I usually don't read too many horror titles because I am an absolute wuss and I would get just as scared.
Yeah.
There's some of the artwork where it shows the monster getting closer and you can start making out the features and I'm like,
Yeah, I'm also on that vein. I can't horror.
There's another title that I read that I enjoyed that also made my heart pound in excitement and fear, called Raging Loop. Raging Loop is a story about a stranger who comes across a rural village and winds up staying there for the night and gets caught up in their very strange folklore and rituals. Right. At night, a werewolf monster goes around the village and kills indiscriminately. And it's his job to keep himself protected. And it's also the villagers' job to meet up every day and try to hold a trial on who they think is this werewolf monster in disguise living among them. It is, somewhat similar to Among Us and the whole werewolf-style forum games. But I really like the horror aspect in Raging Loop because it's a lot more rural. It's about the smaller scale, strange people living, far away from the big city, and there are all sorts of strange mystical traditions at play.
I mean, if you think about it, there's a reason why the, let's say, subgenre of anime and Japanese media itself tends to do in a rural, small village, far away from civilization. Like, see the setting, it already built itself on the mystique.
Next to the big, dark, scary forest.
Oh, yeah! Yeah, exactly.
Yes, so I mean, it's actually a very cool distinction where the main character is pretty logical, and of course he's from the city, so he's not quite buying into all of this spooky, scary nonsense, but as the
so
stuff
he's like
goes along, and he gets more and more convinced that, oh no, this stuff is real.
Okay, but because that's another thing that tends to happen if you introduce into those settings a skeptic who counterbalances with logic everything that is unexplainable and tries to find the root cause. This is often a good device.
I didn't actually care much for Raging Loop near the end. I thought its endings left much to be desired. But premise and the whole spookiness of the atmosphere, those were huge pluses in my book.
Dang. That sounds... Again, it's sad about those endings, but probably nothing is perfect. And at the very least, if the destination wasn't perfect, at the least you had fun with the journey, right?
Yes. A very heart-pounding adventure.
Yeah, speaking of adventure, one of the titles I wrote on my iceberg, I have it in my bag of tricks, Monmusu Quest. An adventure of a zero-T hero protagonist in a world inspired by Kenko Cross, the Monster Girl Encyclopedia. It features a lot of action, geopolitical tensions, and world-shaping events. But that's not the trick. The trick I had in mind, the special moment, the scariness it handles, because some of those examples I gave in my iceberg episode. Yes, the world is scary, the disbalance of power exists. Yet, despite that, people try to live there, but they struggle. Because it's not easy. Some scars run deep, some inherit hatred to the point of not knowing why certain groups hate others, just because from generation to generation the hatred spread and has no basis other than legacy. But the trick I brought and wanted to showcase as a memorable moment is the one I mentioned on the iceberg. It's the best bad ending that I ever read. And it's from that game because they showcase with all that scale what really truly matters is so much smaller. It's so much more personal. And in your road to be a hero, if you abandon that, what you hold dear, and when you abandon what's the most important thing, you slay what you went to slay, and at the end of the road, as a hero that conquers challenges, you get a treasure. And the meaning of that treasure is such a powerful subversion of expectation. There are no words for me to describe it. You have to experience it. It's such a great trick they did.
Mm-hmm. The premise of Monster Girl Quest is that you have all of these fictional famous creatures from folklore or mythology or what have you, and they all show up in the game as cute anime girls.
Yes.
And I mean, that's partially, it's supposed to be ridiculous and lighthearted, but there's plenty of times where the game kind of drills down into the details and you realize this is pretty terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying if you think about the disbalance of power and how animals in real life even are very powerful in a physical sense. And such, their anime manifestation, let's call them, also inherit that power. You can't really stand against those kind of forces, even though the obviously animification made them very cute and seductive. But when they drill down, for example, how would that look in society, and think about the consequences. Yeah, the plant monsters need soil, so they will probably invade your crops, but they will act as invasive plants that will destroy your crops, and then you have yield. You have very poor yield. Like this disturbs ecosystems, and they go really in depth on that stuff.
Where it turns out it's not all sunshine and roses. There are many problems involved, having just, hundreds of very strange creatures trying to inhabit this world right next to humans, huh?
Yeah, and trying to live in peace and coexistence is not as easy as just doing that.
No,
there are many more problems.
On that note, there's another title I wanted to bring up called Soul Set. It's another Western visual novel developed very clearly inspired by Virtue's Last Reward and 999, the Zero Escape series. It is a great mystery involving dangerous, scary monsters and magic, where you have these 6 people trapped together in a mansion, and they slowly explore their surroundings, figure out how they got trapped here, and how they can escape. It's not exactly a scary horror story, although, like I said, there are some very dangerous topics that they encounter, and there's plenty of magic involved to give it a very Halloween atmosphere.
Okay.
You don't know what exactly will happen. You think you have a handle on things, and then something pops out of the closet, and it's like, oh my goodness, and now you're spending the next 10 minutes trying to stay alive.
Okay.
Not only that, and then there's always the questions of who you can trust and what people are actually trying to accomplish. And pretty soon you have a great mystery tied in with some supernatural elements.
How would you rate it? Because we had an episode on mysteries.
Does it Yeah, I would rate
That-
it like a solid 8 out of 10. And that's me using the whole scale. So I know some people will say, oh, that's just good. It's like, no, a 5 is like the midpoint for me. Something being 8 out of a 10 gets... I very much enjoyed it. I love getting to know the characters, and just every time I made a choice, I had no idea what new surprises this mansion would spring in store for me. I love making different choices and seeing how different timelines are playing out, and some of the very clever things they did to tie the whole plot together.
Now let me finish the question. Because I wanted to ask you, how do you rate it? Using our definition of good mystery, that being solvable.
I don't remember off the top of my head how solvable Soulset's mystery is. I don't think it serves as a good mystery if you're approaching it like a detective. I think it's because it's fictional and there's all sorts of magic involved. It's the sort of thing where things happen and you didn't realize that was possible, or that was even an element. It's kind of like how you're thinking inside the box, and then poof, it's like, oh, actually, this book, totally spelled everything out for us. And you're like, what? I didn't know it could do that. And it's like, yeah, and it just...
Yeah, magic can ruin the idea of solving mystery by logic.
Mm-hmm. So if
it
you're
has
looking,
a tendency.
Yeah, for a perfectly logical solution, I don't think this soul set tries to go down that route.
Okay.
It's instead of just opening mystery after mystery, and then every time it answers a question of how something happened, it introduces more questions. I know there's plenty of works that treat that as like a spiraling, out of control plot, where you just get overwhelmed with questions, and then it's like, well, what's the point of even figuring out any of this stuff? But I think Soulset handles it so well, where you feel like you're making progress and you're learning more about things, but then you just look at the big picture and you're like, oh my god, there's so much more to figure out.
It does not necessarily need to be logical, solvable to be a good mystery, so don't get me wrong. And I obviously wanted a follow-up question, how do you personally rate it regardless of it? So we got our sequence swapped, which is fine. Okay, it's actually interesting. So it's more based in
going along
descent
for
to the root of the cause with the magical spookiness around it, okay?
Yes, all sorts of Halloween spookiness.
Oh yeah, exactly. Speaking of spookiness, speaking of continuing, yes, okay, for Halloween episode, I did prepare more Monster Girls, okay? Oh, wow. Blame me. This time, Princess X. So this is a very interesting title because it's an eroge that is built as a parody. So unlike the previous one, some Monster Quest, which tries to adapt very faithfully all the ideas, all the concepts of that world, this one instead tries to twist them and deconstruct them and just simply poke fun of them. For the
Monster
sheer
Girls, right?
Yes, of Monster Girls genre, with the premise being that for some reason the protagonist has multiple fiancés and he's trying to remember back from the past, from his childhood memories, who did she made a promise with, and that's the story unfolds, and it has multiple layers to it. One of which is very something that is always very interesting to me is how the presence of parents' characters shape the story. And in his story here is the father of the MC was a merchant, an interdimensional merchant who encounters all those monster girls. And because obviously his son was with him, he met all of them, and one of which is the promised one. And now the mystery begins. Who was it? It's a very quirky title. out of the screenshots I've prepared, I even put a screenshot of choices. So basically, on your escapade of finding out the fiancé, you have two sisters that tries to both guide you and ask you questions. And out of those opinions, so for example, you have a sister that is kind of in a role of a mischievous one, like a role of a devil, and one that is more organized, like a role of an angel. So you have an angel and a devil speaking to you all the time, and you decide whose opinion you more strongly agree with. And that dictates your route. That was very interesting. I remember being very surprised on that system.
Yeah, that's so usually instead of choices, you'll just consider what your responsible sister would say and what the more mischievous one would say, and you think of whose opinion you want to follow more.
Exactly.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, like, wow, that's so refreshing, even. Wow, I was very surprised on that. But what I was also surprised about, how they twisted the formula of what I spoke before. So where in one Muso quest, they describe a world, its geopolitical tensions, etc. Here, what they subvert is a very very often used trope in horror, because what they made a premise of, it's a small of a spoiler. I think you get it in the middle of story, but humans are the real monsters. That's the premise, because what happens and what guides monsters is their inability to lie. They can never lie, ever.
Oh?
But humans do. And they use them. Because of they cannot detect lies, and they are very gullible because of that. And that twist was, oh boy, that one was scary.
Also, scary for the human side of things or monster side?
Both, because the potential of how to exploit that nature, how to turn monsters against each other to create wars out of nothing, and it comes back to bite humans also. So in both ways, it was very scary, and due to that, very memorable. There are a lot of human characters in that game, and they made a really good point that it's hard to detect who's the bad actor there. You can be a good human, you can be a bad human, you don't know because they lie. Yet somehow, for some reason, you have to believe that monsters can't lie, so you can trust them so much more.
It's an interesting approach, right?
Yeah, like, wow, and every time a monster was wrong, it was due to misunderstanding, not outright lie. They were never lying for their benefit, they were always honest. Yet, obviously, they could not have information that could mean they could misunderstood something. They were honestly making mistakes. Like, human did not. They could outright lie with purpose. And that was scary when they showcased the duality of that.
Yeah, the whole contrast between, I guess you could say, the trick side of wanting to manipulate others and the treat side of just being straightforward and honest.
Exactly. And that's why I chose this title to represent both.
That's a perfect one.
Yeah.
And now, on the side of treats, for the whole trick-or-treat side of this episode, I wanted to talk first and foremost about Fate Hollow Ataraxia. Most people are aware of Fate's Day Night. I talk about it often. And, it's one of the biggest VN titles there is out there.
True.
But it does have a sequel which doesn't get as much attention.
For shame.
I know, right?
So good.
Half of Fate Hollow Ataraxia follows the story of a new main character who's trying to win the Holy Grail War, the whole battle royale, and the problems she faces. It's very pretty dark and serious, and occasionally philosophical. It's a very similar mood to the first one.
Yes.
But the other half of Fate Hollow Ataraxia is just normal daily life gag comedies. You have the main characters and all of the people involved just living in relative peace, and they're just trying to get through their days. And some of them get up to some hilarious hijinks. And the whole mood of it is a complete opposite of the first one, where we're all fighting to the death. And now you just go look, and you see that Castor is holding a part-time job at the neighborhood antique store, and she has to keep dealing with idiot customers.
Oh, I love that one. Oh man, that was something else.
I know. I came across this before I saw the anime Carnival Phantasm, which is the exact same mood. It's about all of the Type Moon characters just getting into hilarious hijinks. So this was like my first taste to it, and I basically got double overload of all of this sweetness.
Oh yeah. That are a crazy dose of sweetness. Holy heck.
I also liked there were also, some segments too that explored all of the characters' pasts. It wasn't all just, comedy. There were several parts where you got to learn, what made these mythological characters into the people they were today. And it provided a lot of backstory, especially for some characters who didn't really get the spotlight in the first game. And you could really see where they were coming from. And
some of them, all those scenes, had a very good blend of humor and backstory and characterization at that point. One of the most memorable scenes for me from the, let's say, daily hijinks side is actually Archer's. And his monologue with a side character that was not important, but she lost a cat and he helped her to recover a cat. Because he debated with her what makes a hero. And that was amazing. Like, that's so... I can't describe it as words.
Normal high school girl is just trying to get the cat out of the tree. And he's trying to lecture her about how this cat will never learn until it faces the consequences of its actions. And she's so thankful that he fished the cat out of the tree for her, and he's trying to argue like, no, this is not a good thing, this cat will never learn. And she's just all, thank you, mister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hero. And that was so good. I remember to this day. That was so hilarious because it combines both his psychological deconstruction of hero and its influence, sometimes self-sacrifice of those, never-ending struggle, and on the other side is the most, I wouldn't say ignorant, but just simple approach. Thanks for help. You're my hero. I was speechless at that moment. That was so great. Why this title does not get more recognition? There's plenty more, don't get me wrong, but that scene alone just made my mind blown. And it was so sweet, so wholesome. All
right, but that's enough of that. What other titles do you have that also made your heart melt, Enmar?
Yeah, and speaking of heart meltings and maybe more frosting and some of that, a sweet title about running a perfectly normal restaurant in a perfectly normal world. With cat girls. It's Nekopara, okay? I brought Nekopara.
It's not perfectly normal. It's cat girls. Biologically engineered cat girls.
Don't question it. It's sweet. It's sweet to the point of diabetes, definitely. So take your doses sparingly. But yeah, I specifically wanted to highlight Volume 3. And I think they do a really good job, because what tends to happen, and before I go to the specific of my moment that I prepared in Volume 3, what tends to happen with safe Mareeck or Swedish games is they continue to be safe, meaning there's kind of a pattern you see. You can predict some events or drama before it even happens. But I think they did a really good job, because they amped the ante every single time. And the way it escalates was very intriguing, because the first game had the least drama. It was the most, would the protagonist accept the cat girls or not? Find out. Hint, we have a lot of titles in this series, so he will, okay?
He definitely will.
The second was a bonding moment. So in a family deconstruction, what does it mean to be an older sister, a responsible one? How much responsibility do you take? Would other people misinterpret your good nature? Because a lot of siblings care about others, even though they don't see the care. That was the drama in the second game. And the third game introduces the drama of what's a friendship and how does it function, and how can you misinterpret friendship. And this specifically deals with a person who was so dedicated to another person. So you have two friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
One cat girl, second cat girl. And the one tries so much to support the other that it goes out of the way to not spend time with her. And in a way, sacrifices their friendship so the other can succeed. And that's not how friendship works. And the drama was very interesting. I really like that one, because it showcased your friend don't want you sacrificing yourself. You cannot be as selfish as to sacrifice yourself for my sake. I, as a friend to you, want you to be as good of a position that I am. And that was such a wholesome moment. I can't describe it with words. Like, that's such a good lesson to learn.
It's so sweet. Mm-hmm. Seeing friendship come out ahead in the end, and everyone grows.
Yes, exactly. And you cannot just selfishly be the best friend because I sacrifice myself. So go off, king, go off, queen. No, the other friend also wants you to be in the best position ever. So by sacrificing yourself, you will, in turn, hurt your friend.
Mm-hmm.
The message, so good. So good. I love it.
There's two more titles I want to talk about really quick. One is Nurse Love Addiction. I spoke about this last week, I believe, about the poor airhead main character trying to make her way through nursing school. It's so sweet because she's trying so hard and she's not the brightest, but she just wants people to be happy. So you root for her the whole way through. The art style and the music help a lot. It's in very soft colors, and the soundtrack is just one piano the whole time. So it gives it a very classy, familiar feel. The whole time you're just hoping she succeeds and she overcomes her struggles. And it's just ridiculously sweet and wholesome.
Yeah, there's always something for those. And I mean that endearingly, okay? Lovable idiots. Because they try so hard with what they have. And you just can't seem to not root for them. Like, I want the happiest ending to go for you, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
On the opposite end, well, sort of, there was another Western VN I read called Syrup and the Ultimate Sweet. It was an indie hit back in 2015, and it also has a very unique, bold but pastel-y art style. It also contains Halloween, magic, and monsters involved, with a witch and Catboy, and a main character who's a scientist trying to scrounge up cash. She somehow comes into the possession of a candy golem, and two of them get up to some hijinks, and they slowly open up to each other more and more.
I just can't describe how you found the perfect Halloween title to end on. Oh my god, that sounds
so
so
Halloween-y.
This sounds so perfect.
It is. It's lighthearted too. It's not entirely lighthearted. I mean, there are a few serious moments, and then it's like, oh my goodness, where's this story gonna go? Are the characters gonna be okay? But if you make the smart choices, and the characters navigate these rocky waters together, and everything ends on a happy note.
Oh. Yeah. So with that said, that ultimate sweet title, let's transition to the end. Thank you everyone for listening in, and I hope every one of you has a happy Halloween. We hope we brighten your day a little bit.
This was a great episode to record with MR, and I'm glad we were here for it to cap off your Halloween weekend, and I hope you all look forward to the holiday.
See ya.